My name is Sharon, and the day I walked into that boardroom, knowing I held a $300 million nuclear option in my back pocket, while the new CEO smiled at me like I was already erased from the company's future, that was the day I understood that revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience. It's about being so thoroughly underestimated that when you finally strike, they never see it coming. Have you ever watched someone take credit for your life's work while looking you dead in the eye? Let me back up. 3 years ago, I was the chief strategy officer at Meridian Technologies, a mid sized tech firm specializing in enterprise data solutions. I wasn't some Ivy League legacy hire. I grew up in a two-bedroom apartment in Queens with a single mother who worked double shifts at a hospital just to keep the lights on. I put myself through community college, then state school, then an MBA program at night while working full-time as a junior analyst. Every promotion I earned, I bled for. Every door that opened, I had to kick down first. Meridian wasn't glamorous when I joined 8 years ago. We had solid products, but zero vision, bleeding clients to flashier competitors. I was brought in to fix our positioning, and I did more than that. I rebuilt our entire go-to-market strategy, identified 3 acquisition targets that transformed our portfolio, and personally led the negotiations that saved us from bankruptcy twice. The CEO back then, Martin Hendricks, was old school but fair. He saw talent regardless of where it came from. He made me CSO at 34, the youngest executive in company history. I love that job. I love the challenge of it. The late nights wargaming competitor moves. The thrill of closing a deal everyone said was impossible. I loved my team. 15 brilliant minds who trusted me and followed me into battles we had no business winning. And I loved the respect I'd finally earned in an industry that had spent years reminding me I didn't belong. Then Martin died. Heart attack on a golf course, sudden and brutal. And everything changed. The board panicked. Martin had been the face of Meridian for 20 years, and the investors were spooked. They wanted stability, a big name to calm the markets. So they brought in Richard Carmichael from a Fortune 500 competitor, a man with a pristine resume and the kind of polished confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself. Richard was 52, silver haired, and had that easy boardroom charisma that made powerful people feel comfortable. I should have seen it coming. Richard's first company-wide meeting was a masterclass in corporate theater. He praised Martin's legacy, promised continuity, and outlined his vision for evolution, not revolution. He smiled at all the right moments, made eye contact with all the right people, and said all the right things about valuing the existing leadership team. I sat in the front row, and when he mentioned the strategy division's contributions, he gave me a nod that felt genuine. I actually believed him. The first 3 months were fine. Richard was learning the business, sitting in on my strategy sessions, asking thoughtful questions. He seemed impressed with our pipeline, particularly the preliminary discussions I'd been having with Quantum Dynamics, a massive tech conglomerate interested in acquiring us. It was early stage, but the numbers were extraordinary. A potential $5 billion deal that would deliver enormous returns to our investors and secure the future for everyone at Meridian. Richard asked me to lead the negotiations. "You know this company better than anyone," he told me in his office. "I trust you to protect what Martin built." So I did. I worked 16-hour days for 6 months, managing every detail of that acquisition. I coordinated with lawyers, investment bankers, accountants. I knew every clause, every contingency, every comma in that deal. Quantum was tough. Their team tried to nickel and dime us on valuations, pushed for unfavorable terms, wanted to gut our leadership structure post-merger. But I held firm. I protected our people, fought for retention packages, and negotiated earnouts that would benefit employees at every level. And buried deep in the merger agreement, in a section most executives never read carefully, I included a clause that would prove to be my salvation. It was standard protection language, the kind that safeguards key architects of major deals. If any C-level executive who materially contributed to structuring the merger was terminated without cause within 18 months of closing, they were entitled to a significant payout, specifically 6% of their division's attributed value in the transaction. For me, that was 300 million. I didn't hide it. It was right there in the document, reviewed by multiple lawyers, approved by the board. But it was technical language in a 1,000-page agreement, and in the rush and excitement of a $5 billion deal, it was just another line item protecting executive interests. Standard stuff. Nobody paid attention. The merger closed on a Friday in September. It was champagne and handshakes, press releases, and congratulations. Quantum's CEO flew in for the signing ceremony. Richard gave a speech about new beginnings and shared success. He thanked me publicly, called me the architect of our future. I felt proud, vindicated, like all those years of grinding had finally paid off. The following Monday, Richard called me into his office. I remember the morning perfectly. Early autumn sunlight coming through his windows, the smell of expensive coffee, the skyline stretching out behind him like a promise. He was sitting at his desk, relaxed, almost casual. He didn't ask me to sit. "Sharon, I want to thank you for your work on the quantum deal," he started. His tone was pleasant, businesslike. "You did an exceptional job." "Thank you," I said. "I'm excited about what's next. I've been working on integration plans." "That won't be necessary." He cut me off gently, like he was doing me a favor. Quantum has their own strategy team, very experienced with post-merger integration. They'll be taking over that function. I felt the ground shift beneath me, just slightly. "I understand. So what do you need from me?" "Nothing, actually." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "We're restructuring the leadership team to align with Quantum's organizational model. Your position is being eliminated. We're offering you a generous severance package, 6 months salary, extended healthcare, outplacement services. I think you'll find it more than fair." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step back. "You're firing me?" "I'm eliminating a redundant position," he corrected smoothly. "It's not personal, Sharon. It's just business. The deal you negotiated makes this company stronger, but it also means we need different capabilities going forward. I'm sure you understand." I understood perfectly. He'd used me to close the deal, extracted every ounce of my expertise and credibility, and now that the ink was dry, I was disposable. Worse than disposable, I was a reminder that he hadn't actually built anything himself. I represented everything he wanted to erase about Meridian's scrappy, hungry past. "This is happening today?" My voice sounded distant, not my own. "HR is preparing your paperwork. Again, Sharon, you should be proud of what you accomplished here. You'll land on your feet." He extended his hand. I looked at it like it was a snake. I walked out of his office in a daze. Security was already waiting to escort me to my desk, watch me pack my personal items, and walk me out of the building. Standard protocol for terminated executives, they said, as if I might sabotage something or steal company secrets. Me? After 8 years of bleeding for that company, my team was devastated. I could see it in their faces as I packed my things into a cardboard box. They wanted to protest, to fight, but I shook my head. "It's okay," I lied. "These things happen." But it wasn't okay. As I rode the elevator down with the security guard standing beside me like I was a criminal, as I walked through the lobby where I'd entered every morning for 8 years with purpose and pride, as I handed over my badge at the front desk and stepped out onto the street, it wasn't okay at all. I went home to my apartment, set down the box, and sat on my couch in silence. I didn't cry. I was too shocked for tears, too numb. I'd given that company everything. I'd sacrificed relationships, health, countless hours of my life, and Richard had discarded me like I was nothing. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, the anger finally came, not hot and explosive, but cold and clarifying. I thought about every condescending smile Richard had given me, every time he'd positioned himself as the visionary while I did the actual work. I thought about how he'd used my credibility with Quantum's team, my relationships, my strategy, and then thrown me away the moment I was no longer useful. And then I remembered the clause. I sat up so fast I nearly fell out of bed. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up my personal copy of the merger agreement. I always kept detailed records of my work, a habit from my days when every accomplishment had to be documented and defended. I scrolled through hundreds of pages until I found it. Section 12.4, subsection C. In the event that any C-level executive who materially contributed to the structure, negotiation, or successful closing of this transaction is terminated without cause within 18 months of the closing date, said executive shall be entitled to compensation equal to 6% of their division's attributed value in the transaction consideration. My division's attributed value in the deal was $5 billion. 6% of that was $300 million. Richard had fired me without cause. There was no performance issue, no misconduct, nothing that would legally justify termination beyond redundancy. And he'd done it exactly 4 days after the 18-month protection period began. He'd handed me a nuclear weapon and didn't even know it. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there calculating, planning, making sure I wasn't misunderstanding. By dawn, I was certain. That clause was ironclad. I'd written it myself, and I'd made sure it was bulletproof because I'd been protecting my entire team's interests. I just never imagined I'd be the one needing it. But I didn't act immediately. That's what people don't understand about real revenge. It's not about the emotional release of striking back. It's about precision. It's about making absolutely certain that when you move, there's no defense, no escape, no way to spin or minimize what's about to happen. I spent 2 weeks doing nothing but research. I hired the best employment lawyer in the city, a woman named Patricia Chen who'd made her career destroying executives who thought they were untouchable. I walked her through every detail of the merger, showed her the clause, provided documentation of my role in the deal. Patricia's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "This is the cleanest case I've seen in 20 years," she said. "They can't claim you didn't materially contribute. You were the lead negotiator. It's documented everywhere. They can't claim cause. Their own severance offer admits it's a position elimination. And that clause is airtight. Sharon, you're sitting on $300 million and they have no legal defense." "What's the process?" I asked. "We send a formal demand letter citing the merger agreement and your entitlement under Section 12.4. They'll probably panic and offer a settlement to avoid publicity. We negotiate from there." "No." My voice was harder than I expected. "No settlement. I want every penny that clause entitles me to, and I want it public. I want Richard to explain to the board and the investors and the press how he fumbled away $300 million because he was too arrogant to read his own merger documents." Patricia smiled. "I like you." We spent another week preparing. Patricia assembled a legal team, drafted the demand letter, and compiled an airtight case file. We documented everything: my role in the merger, the timing of my termination, the exact language of the clause, precedent cases, every possible angle they might use to fight us. Then we sent the letter. I wasn't there when Richard received it, but I heard about it later from people still at the company. Apparently, he went white, called in the general counsel, and spent 3 hours in an emergency meeting with Quantum's legal team. The GC, who'd approved the merger agreement without fully understanding what he was signing, reportedly looked like he might have a heart attack. Because here's what Richard immediately understood: that $300 million would have to be paid by Quantum as part of the merger obligations. He'd just cost his new bosses an amount of money that would absolutely destroy his credibility and reputation. The deal he'd taken credit for had just become a catastrophic liability. 24 hours later, Patricia received a call from Quantum's head of legal. They wanted to meet. "They're going to offer you money to go away quietly," Patricia warned me before the meeting. "Probably a significant amount with a comprehensive NDA. They'll try to make this disappear." "Let them try," I said. The meeting was in a conference room at Quantum's downtown headquarters. Their side of the table had 7 people: lawyers, executives, Richard looking like he'd aged 5 years in a week. Our side had Patricia, one associate, and me. Quantum's general counsel, a sharp-eyed man named Douglas Preston, opened with a carefully calibrated tone of professional courtesy. Ms. Sharon, thank you for meeting with us. We've reviewed the demand letter and the relevant merger provisions. While we believe there's room for interpretation regarding the materiality threshold, there's no room for interpretation. Patricia cut him off. My client was the chief strategy officer and lead negotiator for a $5 billion merger. She's mentioned by name in 47 places in the merger documents. Her materiality isn't debatable. Douglas shifted tactics. Even so, the intent of such clauses is typically to provide reasonable compensation for unexpected termination, not to create windfalls. We're prepared to offer Ms. Whitmore a settlement of $15 million with a mutual non-disclosure agreement and mutual non-disparagement clause. That's more than generous for $300 million. I spoke for the first time. That's what the contract says. That's what I'm owed. Richard finally spoke, and I could hear the desperation he was trying to mask with aggression. Sharon, be reasonable. You're asking for more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes for a job you held for 8 years. This is extortion. I met his eyes across the table. No, Richard. This is a contract you signed. A contract I wrote specifically to protect the people who built this deal. You fired me 4 days after the protection period began. Probably because someone in HR flagged that date and you thought you were safe. But you didn't actually read the clause. You didn't respect me enough to take me seriously. And now it's going to cost you everything. His face went red. You can't seriously expect… Sharon. Douglas raised a hand, silencing Richard. Let me be direct. If this goes to court, it becomes public. The press will cover it. It will raise questions about the merger, about executive compensation, about Quantum's due diligence. Nobody wins in that scenario. You're right, I agreed. Nobody wins in court. That's why you're going to pay me exactly what the contract says, and you're going to do it quietly. Because if you don't, I'm not just going to court. I'm going to every business journalist in New York. I'm going to tell them how Quantum's new CEO cost you $300 million through his own arrogance and incompetence. I'm going to explain how Richard Carmichael used me to close this deal, then discarded me without even reading the protections I'd written for myself. I leaned forward. Your stock price will tank. Your other acquired executives will start reading their contracts very carefully, and Richard's career will be over. So you can pay me what I'm owed and handle this internally, or you can fight me and watch it become the biggest corporate story of the year. Your choice. The room went silent. Douglas exchanged glances with his team, then turned to Richard. The look he gave him could have stripped paint. We need to discuss this privately. Patricia, her associate, and I stepped out into the hallway. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Richard being torn apart by his own people. His face was animated, hands gesturing, but nobody looked sympathetic. They were calculating the damage, weighing options, and clearly arriving at the conclusion that I was holding all the cards. 30 minutes later, we were called back in. Douglas's expression was carefully neutral. We're prepared to meet your demands with 2 conditions. First, a comprehensive confidentiality agreement regarding the settlement amount and terms. Second, a non-disparagement clause preventing either party from making negative public statements about the other. Agreed, I said immediately. I didn't need to trash Richard publicly. The people who mattered would know what happened. His reputation among Quantum's leadership was already destroyed. We'll have the settlement documents prepared within 48 hours, Douglas continued. Payment will be structured as a lump sum, transferred within 10 business days of execution. I nodded. Then I looked at Richard. He was staring at the table, his jaw tight, everything about his posture screaming humiliation and rage. He'd underestimated me, treated me as disposable, and now he was watching his golden reputation crumble in real time. Richard, I said quietly. He looked up, and I saw something in his eyes. Disbelief that this was actually happening, that someone he dismissed so casually had just destroyed him. You should have read the contract. 2 weeks later, $300 million appeared in my bank account. I sat in my apartment staring at the confirmation on my laptop screen, and for the first time since that morning in Richard's office, I cried. Not from joy, exactly, though there was triumph in it, but from release, from validation, from the overwhelming proof that my work had value, that I hadn't been crazy to believe in my own worth, that justice was still possible. The money was extraordinary, obviously. It was generational wealth, security beyond anything I'd imagined. But that's not what mattered most. What mattered was that I'd been erased, dismissed, treated as irrelevant, and I'd proven that I was anything but. I'd written my own protection into a deal so complex that even the man who fired me didn't understand it. I'd played the long game, stayed calm, and used the very system that had tried to discard me to demand recognition and respect. Richard was quietly pushed out of Quantum 6 months later. The official story was that he was pursuing other opportunities, but everyone in the industry knew what it really meant. He'd cost the company $300 million through his own negligence, and that kind of mistake doesn't get forgotten or forgiven. His golden reputation was tarnished permanently. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I took a month to decompress, to process what had happened, to figure out who I was beyond the career I'd built. Then I started getting calls. Headhunters, investors, executives who'd heard whispers about what happened and wanted to work with someone smart enough to protect themselves that thoroughly. I turned down most of them. Instead, I started my own advisory firm, helping other executives negotiate their contracts, protect their interests, and understand the fine print that could save or destroy them. I hired some of my old team from Meridian, the people Richard had also discarded in his restructuring. We built something different, something where respect and protection were built into the foundation. And I made sure every contract I ever negotiated included language that protected the people doing the actual work. About a year after the settlement, I got a LinkedIn message from Patricia Chen. She'd attached a news article about another executive at a different company who'd successfully used a similar clause to protect themselves after being terminated post-merger. The executive had cited my case as precedent. "You changed the game," Patricia wrote. "Every smart executive is demanding these protections now. You made the system a little more fair." I read that message 3 times. Because that's what it was really about. Not just my revenge, my payout, my vindication. It was about proving that people like me, people who'd clawed their way up without advantages, without connections, without the protection of privilege, could still win. That if you were smart enough and thorough enough and refused to be dismissed, you could write your own justice into the system. I still think about that morning in Richard's office sometimes. The casual cruelty of his smile, the way he'd discarded me like I was nothing. And I think about the look on his face in that conference room when he realized what he'd done. But mostly I think about the clause, 23 words buried in a 1,000-page document that I'd written to protect my team, never imagining I'd need it myself. 23 words that changed everything. I keep a framed copy on my office wall now. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The system isn't fair, and the people at the top will always try to stay there. But if you're smart enough, if you know your worth, if you protect yourself and refuse to be erased, sometimes you can make them pay for underestimating you. And that's not revenge. That's justice. Because the most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to erase you isn't to rage or despair. It's to prove that you wrote yourself into the story so carefully that they can't remove you without destroying themselves.